Return to Oz came out in 1985 and was directed by Walter Murch. It stars Fairuza Balk. So this movie is a sequel to the original Wizard of Oz, and right off the bat you notice it's not a musical, and it is a lot darker than the original movie. So the film opens up back in Kansas. Dorothy is now played by a much younger actress. Anthem decides that it might be time to get Dorothy some help because she doesn't believe that Oz is real, and nobody really does. So she brings her to this doctor. The doctor kind of listens to her story and decides pretty much immediately that he's going to use his electric shock therapy on her, try to cure the thoughts in her head. So when the doctor is about to do the treatment on Dorothy, the power goes out in the whole hospital. Dorothy escapes and ends up going into a river where she wakes up in this crate and she's just drifting in the ocean somehow. I don't know how she got there from Kansas, but... So eventually Dorothy wakes up and she is with a chicken from her farm named Billina. She doesn't know how the chicken got there, but the chicken can now talk. And they start talking and they realize they've made it to Oz again. And they're in the middle of a desert and they need to figure out what's happening. So Dorothy finds the Yellow Brick Road, which is now all mutilated and destroyed, follows it to the Emerald City and notices that everyone is either gone or turned to stone. The whole city's destroyed. So Dorothy really wants to know just what happened. So eventually Dorothy ends up getting chased by these weird creatures called the Wheelers, the very terrifying people with wheels on the end of their hands and legs, so they just kind of chase you. Dorothy ends up getting trapped in this room, finds a robot named Tick-Tock that offers to help them. You have to wind up Tick-Tock if you want him to work. So they end up figuring out what happened to Emerald City. The Scarecrow, who was the king, got captured when the Gnome King conquered the whole city, and now pretty much the Gnome King runs all of Oz. So Dorothy goes and meets up with this princess named Mombi, who can take off her head and switch it with any other head that she has in her collection. Dorothy realizes that Mombi only wants her for her head, but Mombi traps her in the tower. So in the tower, Dorothy meets another friend named Jack Pumpkinhead, who was made to try to defend the Emerald City, but instead Mombi just turned him into kind of a walking abomination, and he was trapped in the tower. So Dorothy steals this magic powder that will turn things alive, the same way that Jack got animated to life. And she instructs everyone to build this big contraption made out of like a couch, some palm leaves, and this mounted head on the wall. And she ties them all together, pours the dust on them, and makes this creature called the Gump. And they use the Gump to fly out of the castle all the way to the Gnome King's mountain, and are pretty much instantly trapped again by the Gnome King. And he says, I turned the Scarecrow into an ornament. You can go find him. You each get 3 guesses. I'll let everyone go. So he keeps sending one of the friends in at a time, and eventually Dorothy is the last one to go. Nobody can find the Scarecrow. So she's looking in the room for the ornament. Eventually, on her 3rd try, finds the Scarecrow, realizes that the Gnome King turned everyone into green ornaments, so she goes around finding all the green ornaments. And they pretty much fight the Gnome King because he gets mad that they won the little game they were playing. And the way the Gnome King dies is the chicken lays an egg into his mouth, and it's poison, and he dies. So finally, Dorothy gets sent back to Kansas. The doctor had been killed in a fire at the hospital, and the nurse got sent away to jail. So everything is pretty much fine. Oz is saved, and Dorothy is back home with her family in Toto. Special effects were a lot more advanced than some of the ones we've seen in the other films, and there was a lot of them. Billina the chicken honestly looked real at some points, but fake in some other points. Just a lot of the overall scenes were filmed with a lot of special effects. And one of the most noteworthy pieces of this movie would be the stop-motion animation used for the Gnome King and like the rock people that lived in the walls at his mountain. I was just very impressed with the way, I was very impressed about how smooth the animation was for the time, the way that when he makes the door, all the hands come out and kind of open the door in the rock wall. The way that the Gnome King kind of appears from out of the wall into kind of like a more humanistic character. And his minions are very interesting too, because they can just kind of move throughout the rocks. And it was animated very well and very seamlessly. The cinematography in this film was very beautiful. A lot of the shots were just wide landscapes of the fantastical world of Oz, whether it be the desert, forest, or just kind of a wide open plain where you can see the Gnome King's mountain. Just all the shots were very detailed and very well put together. One of the main reasons you can tell this is a Disney movie is because of the sound design. The score is just very dramatic, very upbeat at times, but also kind of mellow in some of the darker times. And it just feels like a Disney movie. You can kind of tell that they were looking for a similar direction when they were designing the soundtrack and the sounds of this film. Now I'm going to start talking about some of the things I didn't really like in the film, one of them being the character of Mombi. I thought that she wasn't very interesting as a bad guy, and after her part in like the first half of the play, she kind of becomes a redundant character. She isn't really used for much. She goes to the Gnome King's mountain, but pretty much for no reason. We don't really get a reason. She just gets locked up by the Gnome King. And it would honestly could have used just with either her dying in the beginning of the film or, I don't know, just staying at her castle. Another problem I had with this film were some of the characters in general, like the Gump, for example. Thought like the weird couch kind of creation was kind of a weird character, and he wasn't very fun to watch either. He didn't have very many good lines. He was just kind of there. Same with the chicken. I didn't understand where the chicken came in at this point in the movie. And there were a lot of scenes where I was just confused about Billina and why she was there. Until I guess the climax. Speaking of the climax, I thought that the fact that the Gnome King could be killed by a chicken's egg was kind of lame. And they kind of, even if that scene was meant to be good, they didn't really build it up at all. Billina was just hiding inside of Jack's pumpkin head, and she just happened to drop an egg into the Gnome King's mouth. They didn't really talk about why chickens were forbidden in Oz, why they didn't like eggs. They didn't really explain any of that, so you're just kind of sitting there to realize as it's happening. Lastly, I didn't like the character of Ozma. She was there in the beginning as a mental patient, and she appears at the very end of the film, and we really get no background on her whatsoever, who she is. She's Jack's Pumpkinhead's mom, but we really don't get anything. One more thing I want to say about Return to Oz is the tone shift that it had from the original film. I could see a lot of people bringing their kids to this one expecting the same, but it's honestly a lot scarier and could be traumatic to a lot of kids, especially the opening scene at the mental hospital with the thunderstorms making the lights go in and out. Dorothy's locked to a bed with some straps. It's just a very terrifying scene. And the Wheelers were honestly pretty scary, just watching them kind of roll after Dorothy. They were wearing some pretty scary masks, just unsettling overall. And this film's a lot darker than the original.